and welcome to our webinar on salary negotiation tips and market trends. Given the numbers that we've seen registering for the webinar, it's certainly a topic that is of interest to many of our members, and I think also as well the time of year is quite appropriate too, given that many of you are probably thinking about performance reviews for yourself and your teams, if not before Christmas, generally speaking, and the other side of the Christmas and into the new year. So what we're going to cover today is basically provide you with advice and tips that will help you and will give you the confidence to successfully negotiate your salary and package, and ultimately that will I suppose lead you to a situation where you're comfortable, you're happy, and you're motivated by the salary and package that you have, and that it is a good reflection of, not just your skills and your experience, but also as well that is reflective of the going rate and the market rate for chartered accountants. And we know the market is strong for the most part for members, and Elaine and Orna will take you through that very shortly as well. And you will also have an opportunity at the end of the webinar to put any questions that you might have to us, and we would welcome those questions either as they come to mind, pop them in the chat or the Q&A box, and we'll deal with those questions at the end. So feel free to pop those in. So look, I'm delighted to be joined here today by Elaine Brady and Orna Giblin from Barden, and we're delighted to be partnering with them as part of our engagement with the Young Professionals Committee. So delighted to have them both with me here today. So Elaine is the managing partner of Barden Recruitment, which she set up with Ed in 2014. So obviously Elaine has extensive experience in the area of recruitment, specifically within the area of finance. So she brings with her a wealth of knowledge. She herself studied in the area of finance as well, so obviously has that background as well. And recently then she completed the KPMG Enterprise Ireland Going for Growth program. So congratulations on that, Elaine. And she's also recently been selected for the EY Entrepreneurial Winning Women Awards as well. So again, great to see, Elaine. Well done. We're also joined then by Orna, who herself is a chartered accountant. She qualified with KPMG and stayed with them then and reached senior manager level. And from there, she moved out into industry, holding quite a number of various different roles, culminating then in her being finance director for the Irish operations of Ardagh Group. She's now in recruitment, and she's working with Barden, as we know, and her focus is on supporting chartered accountants and other finance professionals, I suppose, at mid and senior career level, and supporting them through that recruitment journey based on, I suppose, her own qualification and background and experience. So I'm really delighted to have two experts here with me today to support you and to give you guidance in relation to negotiating your salary. So I'm going to hand over now to Orna, who is basically going to kind of set the scene for us on a topic that, it does strike fear in quite a number of us in terms of the thoughts of going into, the kind of the whole salary negotiation process. But Orna is going to help us with this. So I'll hand over to you now, Orna.
Thanks, Karen. Thanks so much. Delighted to be here. My name is Orna, and I'm a consultant with Barden here in Dublin for over a year now. Thanks, Karen, you gave me the background of my industry experience. So I was in the Ardagh Group for 13 years, and I'm now an expert in the mid-senior qualified accounting careers here at Barden for Leinster. And I've been on both sides of the table when it comes to negotiating salaries, and I've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly. That's why I was so thrilled when Karen and the team reached out to myself and Elaine to be part of today's session. Okay, so on to the dreaded topic of salary negotiation. Look, to be honest, it doesn't matter whether you're just starting out your career in finance or already a CFO. We all dread any conversation, even touching on the subject of salary. The art of salary negotiation is a crucial skill that will stay with you throughout your working life. And to succeed, you're going to need a little bit of preparation, rehearsal, and correct positioning to ask for and hopefully receive the pay that you deserve. So why don't people negotiate their compensation? Well, 38% of professionals say it's because they don't feel comfortable asking for higher salaries, and 39% are content with their existing pay. Most people aren't comfortable negotiating their salary, whether because of lack of confidence or job security, or they just don't know how to go about it. Yet we find that 85% of those who do ask tend to receive at least some of what they're looking for. So I suppose the next bit, and why is that? Why do we find that that happens to people? Well, I suppose it really comes down to, because it's not like any other deal you make in your life, you link it to your own self-worth. You're not just negotiating a pay rate to do a job, you're negotiating how much you as a person and a professional are valued at. And that's what makes it so difficult. You may also be afraid to take the chance out of being perceived as being greedy. And a large part of it is likely a cultural and society thing. And we all know our people don't like to come across as aggressive or too full of themselves. We don't like rocking the boat too much. And after we will be grand tends to be our motto for most things. And we probably have all seen negotiation in the media often tends to be quite aggressive and tense. But to be honest, it doesn't have to be like that. You're simply trying to be sure that you're being paid a fair market value and make the right decision for your career. Being upfront about this with management is entirely legitimate and does not come across as aggressive or pushy. Everybody does it. And what we tend to see, really getting a salary is a case of, if you don't ask, you don't get. From my own perspective, having managed a team of up to 10 accountants in our DA, being upfront and honest on both sides is, I feel, what worked best. I did my best to build up an open relationship with all staff members to come to me with concerns around their job, responsibilities, pay, whatever it may be. But I know this isn't the case in all companies. Awareness is key, and you need to communicate with your manager if there's something you're unhappy about, so that you give them the chance to address it or rectify it. We've all heard of the recent buzzword imposter syndrome, and likely most of us have experienced it at some stage. We all likely know it's really described as self-doubt in your intellect, skills, or accomplishments among high-achieving individuals, and this can affect both men and women. This is likely to rear its ugly head around any sort of discussion on salary. However, everyone should remember that employers expect you to negotiate, and you are worthy of a salary that you think is fair. You need to know your worth and to be confident, especially in today's tight employment market. As Elaine will discuss shortly, we are at full employment, the lowest rate of unemployment in history in Ireland. So it really is an employee market, and more power lies with employees, especially as companies struggle to retain staff. So when might you need to negotiate your salary? Well, first of all, logically, if you're thinking about making a move externally from your current role. And again, external moves to a new employer are governed by a different rule set around salaries. They tend to be more market dominated. What does the market dictate should be paid for the role? What is the availability of similar talent on the market? And really, the simple rules of supply and demand will apply here. What salary band does the organisation have sign off to go to market with? So logically, the higher the supply of talent in your specialist area, the lower the opportunity to negotiate anything outside of the formal salary band. It's always important to negotiate. However, salary expectations that push outside of this band can often become a barrier to actually getting the role. And then with regards to internal negotiations, i.e. where you currently work for a company. And here negotiations around salary are substantially more complex. They are based on both previous and potential performance. It becomes more about your internal reputation, how you're perceived across the business, how well you do your role, what is your leadership potential for the company. These types of negotiations can be highly emotive, and that's why we sometimes veer away from having these conversations, really because of how uncomfortable they make us all feel. A salary survey is very helpful. However, it might be tricky to pinpoint accurately which band applies to you without the correct context about you. So it's here that having a conversation to a specialist, an expert recruiter in advance of any negotiation can really help prepare you to get the right information for the market, for appropriate rates, and I suppose what's really specific to your background and your expertise. And what I've seen myself, timing really is key here with a salary negotiation. Internally, it tends to be more complex. Each company is structured differently, very much depends on the size of the organization. And what you will see, and what we all have probably experienced, there's no one standard approach to if and when salary increases occur. Some companies do an annual pay review where there may be an inflationary increase. Some companies may do nothing at all. So for some organizations, pay reviews can be linked to when performance reviews come around annually, and there can be an opportunity for a salary adjustment. A lot of companies will have a standard annual pay rise for all employees to cope with inflation. But what do you do if you think you're worth more than this? There's usually limited scope for getting a salary adjustment outside of the performance cycle. And what we tend to see is that the onus is really on the individual to vocalize your thoughts and to justify your rationale for a pay review. It is generally best to try and have this conversation before your annual performance review. For some companies, the decisions happen prior to annual review meeting and could already be locked in place during the budget process for the coming year. And as we all likely know, it's often tricky to get that budget opened if it's already been locked. So if it's really weighing on your mind, it's important to make management aware of your concerns on your pay or your benefits. Otherwise, it will likely be assumed all is well and that you are happy. If your role has changed and the level of responsibility has increased, this tends to be a good justification for you to argue for an increased package. From my own experience, I've seen that there tends to be hoops to jump through from a HR perspective. So for pay reviews outside the norm, you will likely need their involvement and sign off. Whether you've taken on more responsibilities or a greater level of seniority, they're going to want to see justification for any type of increase in salary. Depending on the business, it might be over to you to research it, frame it, and display just how much you are worth to the business. I'll delve into this part of the negotiation process again later in my tips section, but now over to Elaine for some market insights.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Orna. Some brilliant advice and tips there so far. So basically, so over the next kind of 10 minutes or so, I'm going to try and share basically some of the market trends that we're seeing on the ground here in Bardon. I'm conscious our audience today includes attendees from across the whole island of Ireland. So where possible, I will try to share the data with both, say, an ROI and an NI focus where possible. So look, what can we say about the last 12 months in relation to market trends? And look, really, we have seen it all yet again this year. So from the start of the year, global tech redundancies, creating huge uncertainty by right-sizing their businesses right across the spectrum to the lowest unemployment rate that the nation has ever seen. It was released by Eurostat just last month in October, showed that Irish unemployment at a record low of 4.8%. And I suppose to put into context, like that figure stood at 17% at the height of the financial crisis. When we actually take chartered accountants specifically into consideration, right, we know that across, say, the Leinster region, a massive 99% are actually in full-time permanent employment and up from 96% in 2022. Rate of unemployment across Northern Ireland also reached a new record low of 2.1% between July and September of this year. And the stats released by the Northern Ireland Stats and Research Agency also suggest that there's been a slight rise in earnings across the board too. So what does it mean? And so with unemployment at historically low rates, sourcing talent has become an increasingly difficult challenge for employers across the whole island of Ireland. Another All-Ireland survey reported that 85% of employers plan to hire over the next 12 months. 85%, that's absolutely phenomenal. They're huge numbers. And the availability of skilled labour is an absolutely critical factor in achieving business aims. And it's actually been now reported that labour shortages were a key limiting economic growth factor in both Q1 and Q2 of this year. And look, despite interest rates continuing or remaining at like historical highs, that's a whole other session probably. the data shows that employers are still going to continue to invest in the growth of their businesses. And to do that, they would need to keep hiring over the next year. And over half anticipate that access to the right talent will be their most significant external challenge, an even higher external challenge than these interest rates. So, and given that salaries for chartered accountants are based on the premise, like all professions, are based on the premise of supply and demand, this is absolutely no bad thing for those of you listening here with us this afternoon. In September of this year, we launched our annual Leinster Society and Barden Salary Survey. It's the only data-driven salary survey on the market. And we know from the findings that 2 of the 3 main data points this year, so that's the recently qualified and then the overall salary and remuneration package for chartered accountants across Leinster, is up a massive 8% and 6% respectively in the last 12 months. Look, yes, the numbers are Leinster specific, but we know from the data that we track here at Barden that actually the same holds true for all regions across the island of Ireland, albeit just from a slightly lower base point. Another key trend to note is in relation to hybrid working, something that I think we will all admit has become a vital part of our working lives. So within 2022, the average time spent in the office for accountants was just shy of 40%, so just shy of 2 days a week. The average of 2023 is quite interesting. It's now up 53%. So that's a 13% increase in the space of 12 months. And I suppose kind of very much going in the wrong direction from what we know, look, the average employee wants. And like in general, what we're seeing is that employers, the natural state is that they are keen to have people in more rather than less. And I suppose what we will to look, if the market does cool and becomes a little bit more, say, employer-led rather than employee-led as it currently is, we will likely see that percentage creeping higher and higher. And so then on to another trend, look, that's ramping up in both kind of visibility and importance over the last number of years, and that's DE&I, or diversity, equity and inclusion. For many firms, D&I, as I might refer to it now, it forms part of the environmental, social and governance, or the ESG agenda. And in many cases, DE&I now is not only linked to, but actually driven by the S in the social agenda, in the ESG agenda. As part of this, social value is likely to increase in relevance in 2024. So there'll be increasing demand to know what major organisations are doing to foster D&I through the work that they do and the projects that they deliver locally. In the last 12 months, we've seen D&I evolve from what was predominantly around, say, kind of gender and race initiatives across organisations, to including really important areas such as like the hiring inclusion of neurodiverse talent in talent pools, mental health and wellbeing initiatives, skill-based hiring. It's becoming much, much broader in its scope. And look, we're going to, the year ahead, we'll actually see the continuation of these trends for DE&I in employment across Ireland. And look, because ultimately the regulations are now demanding more attention for this issue as employers battle through the current shortage of skilled labour. Like socio-political drivers, regulatory oversight, such as gender pay gap or ethnicity pay gap reporting, they're very much now at the forefront, with regulators shifting preferences to publish targets with fines for non-compliance rather than just a nice to have. Skepticism about companies, they kind of going through the motions on DE&I, is driving an ongoing trend of shareholder activism as well that we're seeing. So shareholder activism has long been an issue that's driven companies to work harder on DE&I. That's a trend that's likely to continue as greater progress is demanded by investors. And like organisations, shareholders are also now just not asking just for the information about D&I programmes and intentions, but hard evidence of the changes being implemented. This work could include creating job opportunities for accountants with an ESG skill set, or creating projects for accountants internally, addressing mental health and well-being ultimately in these large projects that they deliver for their organisations. Another positive trend that we will likely hear more about next year and onwards is obviously the Irish implementation of the EU's new Pay Transparency Directive, which was agreed last year and has to be implemented within 3 years. So the new salary transparency rule will mean that companies in the future will have to publish the pay ranges for jobs, not just externally in job advertisements, but also for their internal staff. And look, while not officially becoming a legal requirement yet in Northern Ireland, A salary transparency pilot scheme was launched in the UK in March of last year, where participating employers listed salary details on jobs. And also what's interesting is they stopped asking about salary history during the recruitment process. And I suppose the hope here is that that maybe indicates that, you know, that legislative change may also become a reality in Northern Ireland soon. And finally, look, I don't think we could really talk about trends this year without mentioning the rapid rise of AI and ChatGPT. In particular, not only is it taking up the column inches in the last couple of days with all the upheaval, but it's been a consistent over the last 12 months. And really what we're seeing right on the ground is that like organizations, they are slowly getting curious about AI. And what they're doing is they're looking at it to see where can it add value, you know, to the organizations. But the reality so far is that it will likely just compete some more of the basic administrative duties, freeing up time for accountants to spend more time on commercially orientated value add activities. And like the pace and scale of the transition is one I know that we'll all be watching, obviously, with great interest as it evolves. So overall, I suppose to synopsize, like it's predominantly positive trends that we're seeing across the island of Ireland. It's continued demand for high caliber talent, increased remuneration despite ongoing redundancies across the broader employment market, and significant increase in organisations' DE&I policies. So all in all, really, really positive and exciting time to be a chartered accountant. And now over to you, Karen.
Thank you. Thanks a million. And thanks, Orna. I think, Orna, what I liked about what you were talking about there was, I suppose, the specific situations, because as you said, there is a different, you know, kind of approach. You're in a different situation, whether you're, I suppose, looking to negotiate when you're internally within an organization, and the considerations there. And obviously then if you're applying externally and going through that negotiation process as part of an offer. So that was really insightful and great to hear your own experiences from that perspective. And then the confidence piece, I'm going to touch on that now shortly, because that can be a blocker, certainly for people who are looking to have these conversations. So it's a nice segue into what I'll be covering shortly. And Elaine, thank you so much for your market insights, and it certainly would reflect what we're seeing here ourselves in the Institute through our own recruitment service, and also as well just in terms of the kind of the HR and D&I insights are interesting to note, because obviously they're setting the trends, and like you were saying as well, like it's interesting to note the increase in I suppose organizations looking for their staff to return to the office, not full time, but like the expectation being that you're in the office more than you might have been a year or two ago. So we've noticed that ourselves too, that there's definitely been an increase in the expectation on the employer's part, and it certainly will be one to watch. I would agree with you that it's not the most positive development, but let's watch that
going
space.
the wrong way for sure.
It is. But look, let's watch that space. So basically what I'm going to do now is just, I suppose, take you through a few pointers in terms of, I suppose, the strategic importance of negotiation skills in general, and how you can build your skills overall in the context of managing your career, and also obviously building your confidence. Because if you think about kind of negotiation skills, they are important not just in the context of salary negotiations, but they are also important in terms of like your day-to-day I suppose role as a chartered accountant, irrespective of the level you're at. But obviously you'd expect, as you I suppose kind of climb the career ladder, that having strong negotiation skills will help you in terms of like your credibility. For example, it'll help you in terms of obtaining resources, and I'm sure Orna can speak to that too, as she moved up and developed her team, that you do need to be able to put a strong case forward, negotiate. Also as well, just in the rough and tumble of politics in the workplace, being able to kind of stand your ground. And also then, like we've touched on, I suppose things like working from home and working conditions, etc. Like, so being able to negotiate in a credible, effective way. And not just that, it also comes down to kind of role discussions and also discussions around your overall career trajectory in the organization. So fundamentally, negotiation skills are really important to the overall success of your career. But the great thing to note is that you can develop those. You know, if you feel that, look, they're not where they should be, there are ways and means by which you can develop those. You know, and as I said, like, you know, I suppose the negotiation is important as part of your salary, but it's also important in terms of, you know, taking control of your career and negotiating, you know, where it is you want to be in terms of your career, and not just going with the flow, taking that ownership, taking that control and managing your career, and really thinking it through in terms of where you would like to go. And, you know, I suppose your career success is very much, you know, inextricably linked to your ability to be able to command a certain salary. So to my mind, if you are effectively managing your career overall, you're going to be in a much better place to negotiate your salary. So I suppose the key thing is as well to remember is to, you know, take ownership, take control of your career. And, you know, I'm always a firm believer that if you're doing that and your career is moving forward, for the most part, you know, the salary and increased benefits will follow once you're managing the whole process very, very carefully. And it is then taking into account, I suppose, the different elements that Orna and Elaine have said and mentioned already along the way, including being aware of what the going rate is, and very much keeping in touch with your network, and as Elaine alluded to there, speaking to the experts in the market to get a sense of what you know, is happening out there. The other key thing in terms of the overall career management aspect is to invest in your professional development, because that is going to help you to drive your career forward and ultimately lead to you know, more lucrative salary and package operation, or package and remuneration opportunities. And it's really about, you know, kind of mapping out your career development and seeing, well, look, where are the gaps in terms of the skills that I need to move my career forward. It's not just a case of, you know, choosing any course and doing a course just for the sake of it, as much as that might be tempting, particularly at this time of year where, you know, you're under pressure to get your CPD done, and, you know, it can be a bit of a tick the box exercise. But do be more discerning and you know, more considered in terms of the skills that you need to develop. So look at, you know, where the gaps are for you, and look at the ways in which you can best fill those gaps. And look, it's not just about courses. That could be, you know, finding a mentor. It could be you know, about maybe working closely with an executive coach. And I see that as an increasing trend with our members, you know, as they're progressing their career, that they have a career partner there in the shape of a coach who they meet with on a regular basis, that helps to direct their career, keeps them on track. There's a bit of accountability there as well, which is always really good. So, you know, it's really just making sure that, you know, from every element of your development, like both in terms of the technical side, but also the soft skill side, and particularly as you're moving through your career and into more senior roles, that the soft skill side of things becomes more important. And Elaine mentioned AI. Obviously, that is like AI and technology is, you know, featuring in all of our roles. So it is really important, for example, to make sure that you're keeping up to date and what the skills requirements are. And one of the, I suppose, the key growth areas we have seen for our members has been in that, you know, kind of financial analysis, you know, leveraging data as part of their roles, the business partnering side of things as well, and also then the whole area of transformation, change management, etc. So again, it's about just making sure that when you're developing your career and choosing skills to add to it, that it is aligned with what the needs are in the market. Because if you can fill those gaps for organizations, you're positioning yourself really very strongly for, you know, a better salary and a better package. And the key thing really is to kind of play to your strengths, and then look at the areas that you're naturally good at and that you enjoy. Because again, I would be a big believer that if you're in a role where you're playing to your strengths and you're in a role that you really like, you're going to perform, you know, if you're performing well, you're more likely to be able to achieve a salary that is competitive, and that is you know, I suppose gives you that sense of motivation and fulfillment. So Lorna rightly said that, you know, look, self-confidence can be an issue and a career blocker, and that can also then lead into, you know, not having the confidence to bring up the conversation around salary. And we ran a webinar a couple of weeks ago on overcoming career doubt and building self-confidence, and it was one of our most well attended webinars this year. So it just goes to show that, you know, many people and many members included in that, you know, do feel that self-confidence is an issue for them, and surveys show that like up to 70% of people, even those in senior positions, are impacted by lack of confidence, you know, that career doubt creeping in. Like I was speaking to a senior partner in one of the firms recently, and they themselves said to me, Karen, look, you know, I have to battle this on a regular basis. And, you know, from the outside, they look like they're, you know, they have it all. They've got the confidence to stand up in front of, you know, the boards of big companies, manage large teams. But there are times when even they are impacted by lack of self-confidence. So it does, you know, impact a lot of people. But the great thing about it is that there are ways in which you can manage your confidence, and, you know, I suppose helped though dealing with those feelings of self-doubt. And some of the ways, and this is just a snapshot, but if you go onto our website, you'll see the link to that webinar there that will go into more detail. But the first thing I would say to you is just beware of that negative self-talk. We all have that going through our minds, and like at a time of salary negotiation, you be kind of think, God, no, I can't go in and do this. Like this isn't going to land well. What are they going to think of me? Like, why would I be, you know, eligible for a salary increase? So it's really just to beware of what it is you're saying to yourself in this space, and to check in with it and kind of say, is this valid? Or is it just me, you know, regularly talking to myself negatively when I shouldn't be? So it's just that awareness and stopping that negative self-thought. And we all do it. It's just the brain tends to be wired for more negative thoughts and feedback as opposed to positive. So it's just switching that narrative. We already mentioned the imposter syndrome. So again, it's that kind of feeling of, gosh, like, do I really deserve to be at this level? When am I going to be found out? Look, I'm not as good at this role as somebody else. So again, just being aware of that, and, you know, I suppose replacing that negative thought with a much more positive narrative, much more positive mindset and outlook. And even if you change one or two of those negative thoughts to positive ones on a daily basis, the cumulative effect of that is really positive. I was listening to a TED talk the other day, and one of the things they said was that as humans, we need 16 feelings of, you know, boosting our self-confidence every day. So that could be, you know, even just the feel-good factor of somebody saying hello to you in the morning, or somebody saying something to you like, oh, Elaine, well done on that. You know, so we do need that positive self, you know, affirmation, whether it's from ourselves or others around us. So it's just to be more open to it, and you know, to kind of, I suppose, beware that we all do need that, and that's just a human need, shall we say. The other thing is to really kind of focus in on your successes, and this is really important, particularly in the context of your salary negotiations, because you need to be going in armed with, you know, an outline of your successes, why it is that you are, you know, looking for a pay rise, why you are worthy of it. So it's a really good idea to keep a list of those successes, because as the year goes on, we can tend to forget about those. So what I would often suggest to kind of both my team members and you know, members that I would coach and support in the career space is to keep an Excel spreadsheet, which we know accountants all love, and it's just to keep a list of those successes, because if you've had a success in January, by the time it comes to December, let's face it, you're going to forget about it. So it's really important to have that list of successes. So it gives you that, I suppose, ammunition, for want of a better expression, when you're going into a salary negotiation. You can also use it if you're going into an interview scenario. You can also use it to kind of highlight achievements in your CV. So it's a really great, like a bank. I often call it a success bank, but it's really very useful to do, and just land in those successes very quickly, even at the end of the month, to kind of say, what will I pop in there. Also, going into any salary negotiation or indeed an interview, preparation is key. And like Orna will be covering part of that, and we've alluded to it already. It's really being armed with information. So knowing your successes, knowing the market rate. So it's really being well informed going in. The other thing in terms of boosting your confidence is to have a mentor or a coach. I've alluded to that already. It's nice to have somebody in your camp that's there to support you, that gives you that confidence to keep going. There's a bit of accountability there and pressure too. So that can really help. And then what I would say is, just in general, to kind of mind yourself and your mental health, because we all know that when you're feeling a bit low, the confidence it tends to be low as well. Whereas if you're in a better space from a mental health perspective, you're naturally going to feel more confident as well. And those two elements are very much kind of interlinked. So it's really important to be mindful of that. And last but not least, I would say, look, celebrate your successes. Because what we can tend to do is, like, yes, there's a success, but like, you're straight on to the next thing, but you don't take that time out to celebrate it. And I think because we're all so busy, and I'm guilty of it myself, it's straight on to the next thing, that you're not taking that breather to kind of say, look, Karen, you did well there. What was it that led to your success? How can I build on that? It's literally kind of, right, great, that's done, now on to the next thing. So it's to take that breather and to celebrate that success. So look, overall, there are really good things, reasons to be positive. Elaine mentioned the marketplace. Your skills, your qualifications as a chartered accountant are very much in demand. The fundamentals are very strong. It is an employer's market, so they're providing increased salaries, a wider range of benefits. So there's lots of reasons to be positive and to be confident in terms of your ability to kind of maximize your earning potential. So it's all very positive. So I'm now going to hand you back to Orna, and she's going to now provide us with some top tips to make sure that you are achieving the best outcome for yourself in terms of negotiating your salary. Over to you, Orna.
Great, Karen, thanks so much. And lots of insightful points there you made, a lot that resonated with me, and a few that stuck with me that I also will touch on as well a little bit too. And I think I might have to check out that webinar that you mentioned as well. I'll have to look back at the history on the CAI website, so thanks for that. So look, I suppose before we close, I thought it would be useful to share some tips to hopefully help ensure you have a successful negotiation process. And I suppose we'll touch on it at the end as well. This is all just suggestions that we have and have seen that have worked, and it's up to everybody to kind of tailor their own approach and use your own strengths as well. So I suppose in the first instance, what we would suggest is, and what we see works best, is you try to remove as much emotion as possible from your pitch. And look, the reality is, we don't want to have these conversations because they are deeply uncomfortable. And moreover, we all fear rejection, what you're trying to do is look at the situation objectively. It's really imperative to help secure a good outcome for you. So what I've seen and what I've done myself is perhaps practice, argue your case several times in front of a mirror, and then, do a trial run with a friend or a partner and ask them to judge it and see if it makes sense to them and if it is compelling. This is a conversation that's going to make both parties a little bit uncomfortable, but discomfort is okay. And linked to this again, you're going to need to be careful of your tone and demeanor. You need to try to treat it like any negotiation process and keep any emotion out of it. You need to resist becoming defensive or even teary. You need to maintain a cool head. And I think some areas that we all probably do is you need to not rush to fill any pauses in the conversation. You know, let your managers speak, listen, consider their point of view. You need to be afraid of silence, pause, consider your response. Remember to take a breath. Respond, don't react is really what is going to help. And above all, you need to be open and honest. Like I've already touched on, you need to show humility. Self-entitlement in salary negotiations is not a good look. And as we've kind of all briefly mentioned along the way, you need to really speak in facts. You need to quantify where possible. We as accountants know this more than anybody. There's only one way to succeed. This is through preparation and lots of it. You need to construct your case, your justification, based on facts and figures that support your claims. As mentioned earlier, while it's important to review salary surveys, speaking to a specialist recruiter who is an expert in your area will likely give you a more comprehensive market rate to work off. You need to ground your argument in quantifiable data to demonstrate what you've achieved rather than what you feel. Just like you wouldn't go into a supplier negotiation with an argument to reduce prices because you feel you deserve it. So I suppose another piece that we kind of mentioned on as well are people don't really like bigging themselves up too much for fears coming across as too cocky. However, humility is the last thing that should be on your mind when negotiating a pay rise. Karen has mentioned this as well, and this is an area we all struggle with, you know, but this is really the time when you need to sell yourself, you need to praise your accomplishments. Karen mentioned the success bank. I myself have done that in the past. I was talking to my husband last night in preparation for this, who was also an accountant, and he mentioned that that is so important. And he encourages his team to do that as well, because we all kind of focus on the day to day, but we forget to look at the overall achievements, the projects, the process improvements that we've all worked on. So one takeaway for you guys, hopefully you'll have many, but one that will be very helpful to you is to record the success bank in Excel, like we all love. So I suppose, again, in your negotiation process, you need to be very careful. You need to not be rude, imply that the company will be worse off without you, but just be sure that you mention every positive trait and accomplishment you can think of. Having this long list will help make your case much more convincing and will also boost your self-confidence. So I suppose the success bank, hopefully you all remember there as well. You want to highlight your value that you've added to the company over the past year, elaborating on the goals you have for the company in the upcoming year. An employer may know that you do a good job, but they probably don't know the ins and outs of absolutely everything that you do, or your longer term ambitions and your longer term goals. So do think about presenting a case to your employer that shows them what's in it for them too, how you plan to keep improving and developing on your future goals. This will show how committed you are to them, to your own career, and how dedicated you are to maximising their return on their investment in you. And again, what Karen kind of touched on as well is around investing in your professional development, identifying any gaps, considering how you can address this. And she also mentioned playing to your strengths, and that's really vital here. So I suppose it's really focusing on the areas we've gone above and beyond what is in the basic remit of your role. And what I'd also suggest, kind of linked to what Karen said, is to consider opportunities where you can be more visible to senior management and hopefully build stronger relationships that way. It's really important that to keep in mind that if your job is going to be the same next year as last year, realistically, you're probably only looking at some sort of incremental increase. So if you individually are looking for a material uplift, then you need to position yourself to be creating more value in the future than in the past. A term that we often refer to here in Barden is earning follows learning, but that means it also follows efficiency and value creation. Increased PQE does not necessarily translate directly into higher salary. And what we tend to see again is after about 3 years PQE, that relationship begins to break down significantly. So what we would suggest you do as well is you need to root your process in your company's process itself. So ideally, it helps if your salary review and the appraisal processes are linked, but like we touched on earlier, they aren't always. So if you are negotiating a salary increase without an appraisal structure, you need to present your case by measuring and assessing your performance in a similar way. What objectives have you exceeded? How can you demonstrate a proven track record of high performance? And probably most importantly, you need to strive for a win-win solution. You can't negotiate for something that isn't possible. But before presenting your case, you must have done your research into what your employer can afford to pay. Luckily, as finance professionals, you're likely privy to that information. And we all know an employer is not going to give you an increase that pushes beyond what the company can afford. If that is the case, then consider variables or the non-monetary parts that are potentially an option, such as additional holidays, more flexibility in working hours, different type of hybrid options. Like Karen mentioned, the increased learning in your own career. There are lots of options out there, and that won't cost an employer an arm and a leg, but could hugely increase your quality of life and your future earning potential. Above all, you must maintain a collaborative approach at every stage of the negotiation process. In some cases, it may make sense to partner with your manager and to get their buy-in, so you can put your best foot forward with more senior management and possibly HR. So by being professional and organised, you can prove to your employer that you're worth investing time and money in. And hopefully by following our tips, you're more likely to get the desired result. So what happens if you don't get what you're looking for? So I suppose if an employer unfortunately doesn't meet you at a fair level, perhaps it might be time to think about whether or not you're being valued and recognised for your contributions. But you do need to remember that those negotiating a salary, it truly is a negotiation. Employers quite often will offer the cheapest offer first. It's your job to come with a counter offer. Negotiating is really about what you think your work value is worth to the company. But you do need to be realistic here, and you need to take stock of your work value ahead of your meetings. What we've also seen quite regularly in recruitment is where somebody might leverage an offer letter. And this is an approach we've seen some people take that we wouldn't necessarily advise, is using an external job offer to assist in negotiating a rise in salary in their current employment. These people have resorted to preparing a CV, doing numerous interviews and preparation, just to try force the hand of their employer if they're not giving them what they're looking for. This, in my view, is a waste of time for all concerned. In most cases, we've seen these individuals recommit to their existing company with their new revised package, but then return to the market a number of months later, realizing that money wasn't really the reason they'd gone to the market the first time around. So if you are considering going down this route, do think long and hard, and please do reach out to friends, family, and look even here at Barden or Karen and the Institute for support. At the end of the day, it is your career, and it is down to you to take ownership over this matter, whether it is securing the highest salary possible or meeting a compromise and focusing more on other benefits. You should decide what is best for your particular career path. You need to consider all factors. It's not all about money. Speaking from my own experience, job satisfaction is key, and money doesn't always buy happiness. I myself, put my hands up here, made a move in my career for money and realized that the role itself wasn't really what I wanted. It didn't give me any happiness, and I made a move quickly after that. So look, hopefully this has helped you gain some confidence about how to approach a salary negotiation. As you can see, there's no one size fits all, but hopefully you have some key takeaways from the session that will help you tailor your own approach to how to do this. The art of salary negotiation is a crucial career skill that will stay with you throughout your working life. But I suppose also it's worth remembering that negotiating is an important life skill. From buying a car to getting housework done to resolving interpersonal conflicts, improving your negotiation skills can help you in all areas of your life. So with that, I wish you all good luck, and hopefully this has been somewhat helpful. And now it's over to any questions that you guys might have. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for that, Orna. There's a couple of key takeaways that kind of struck me there, which was, I suppose that link between kind of PQE and your earnings, kind of eroding over time as such, and it very much depends on the trajectory that your career takes you on. So that's worth noting, isn't it? In terms of salary negotiation skills becoming even more important as you move your career forward, because you can't rely on, I suppose, that kind of reference to kind of PQE. So I think that was really important. I also loved like the earnings follow learnings, because I think very much, and you pointed this out as well, that, you nearly need to be doing, or you do need to be doing that bit extra, and maybe doing a new facet of a role, or adding additional value on top of the day job, to be able to go in and, I suppose, credibly, look for a salary increase and to be successful in that. And then the other point that struck me was that kind of win-win illusion, because from an employer perspective, and that links back to what I was saying there just a moment ago about doing extra, the employer has to feel that there's an upside for them too, that if they're paying you an extra 5 or 10 grand, well, what are they getting? And what are the business getting by way of value add, or return for them. So it's over to our audience now for some questions, and we have one in here already. So, and it basically asks, when asked for salary expectations at interview or in an application form, do you give a number, especially if you don't know what the salary is for that external role? So I might pose that to you, Elaine, and that's a question that I would get often as well, is kind of like, how do I approach it if I'm asked, for my current salary, because your current salary may be low, etc. So over to you to provide us with your insights around that, if you don't mind, please.
No, of course, absolutely. Actually, this is a brilliant question. And like what I touched on earlier, I mentioned very briefly this new EU directive, this pay transparency directive. This is going to be a complete and utter game changer in relation to this type of a situation, okay? Because like the reality is when you're applying for a job, like you should really know what the salary of that job is, but 99% of the time you don't. If you're going through a recruiter, you'll have a band more than likely. But if you're going direct into an organization, they would put negotiable, right? So I would always say, where you can, try not commit to a number. I appreciate there can be a box there. What I tend to do, or what we tend to advise, is putting in something like open to consideration, open to discussion, or happy to discuss in person at a later stage in the process, okay? And what you want to do in the course of that process is find out more about the roles that you've been understanding. Is it similar to the role you're doing? Is there substantially more responsibility? And try to get a salary expectation that reflects that. Saying what your current salary is gives an employer an awful lot of power in a negotiation, because what they'll do is they'll say, oh, great, well, look, I will give that person maybe a 5 or a 10% uplift, and then they'll be happy, right? And actually, that's not really very fair when you think about it, So what I would say is, where you can, try not put something onto an application form. If they ask you the interview process, what I would say is, look, for me, money is not my main driver. I'm driven by progression, by being challenged further in my role. And again, I'm open to a conversation as to what that point might be, so where you can, try and learn as much about the organization, about the, and you have a right as well, sorry, as somebody interviewing, say, look, what, could you please be clear with, could you please let me know what the salary on this role is? So rather than you committing to a number first, ultimately see, can you get the number from them first? And then you can let them know, look, yes, that is in line with my expectations.
Perfect. Great. And as you said then, that obviously that new directive or legislation is going to be a game changer, because it's just going to make things so much more transparent, isn't it? And that probably kind of leads us nicely on to the next question that I have here is, what is the advice if you're looking for an increase because you feel you're being underpaid and undervalued at present, rather than taking on more responsibility? So it's I suppose, how would you deal with that scenario? Or Elaine,
you've touched on this in your learning and learning and stuff.
And look, I suppose it is going to depend on your own situation and the company that you're working for. it's, you know, it's I suppose it's to look at all facts and to see if you feel you're vastly underpaid. Obviously that is an issue, and you know, if it really impacts you and the value that you think you're adding, then you do need to put a justification to management. And hopefully what I kind of outlined will help that. But what we've seen is quite often the responsibility or the onus lies with the employee to do that, to put that case together, which I know isn't ideal, but it's to show really you to really sell yourself again and put together all the arguments, do your research, do your preparation. So hopefully, I suppose if you do feel you can do that, try to approach management with that justification. And you know, it is a challenging conversation, no doubt about it. But I suppose it's hopefully this has helped you get some kind of confidence of how to approach that. And like we said, they can only pay what's within their remit. Hopefully, you have an idea what that could or may not be. And if it isn't to what you're looking for, I suppose maybe it is time to take stock and see, is this where your career is best placed? And is there other options for you? Or is there another area within the business that you could potentially look at going into before considering external options? We'd always say that to any candidate who comes to us, look at your internal options first. You know, there's often lots of opportunity to move internally. So do look at that, improve your worth to the company, get new experience, look at your professional development like Karen touched on. So
Great.
hopefully that has helped.
Yes, it really sounded advice, Orna, and I would echo that in terms of no knee-jerk reactions, I suppose,
Yeah.
you know, just to take a more considered approach. Interesting question here, which says, when does the negotiation ideally start? And this is, I suppose, you know, it's probably more relevant to external, but it could be relevant to internal as well. So it's the question is, when does the negotiation ideally start? Is it once you have an offer or prior to that? Elaine, do you want to take that for us?
And look, the negotiation starts the minute you start a conversation with an organization if you're looking at things externally. So, you know, because what you were doing is you were positioning yourself, you know, you were showing them all of your strengths, where you can add value, where, you know, how quickly you can hit the ground running, all that type of stuff. So, and all of that is linked to how you negotiate at the end. The final number you get to is a really, really, really long process, right? So I always think you should be thinking about negotiating from the very, very start. What value can you add versus what do they need, and where do you meet in the middle? And the key thing about negotiations, and like it's kind of Orna and yourself touched on, Karen, is, you know, it has to be win-win. You know, so you've got to feel if you're moving externally, they're going to be really fairly compensated for the value of the time, your time, for the role you're looking for, the role that you're going to be doing, coupled that the organization feels they've gotten very good value for the talent that they're bringing in. So negotiation, you know, I think if you're only negotiating once you start talking about the very final number, we've missed a trick. You know, so the earlier you can start that, the better.
Absolutely. Perfect. And another question we have in here, they're certainly coming through, and some really good feedback there from a participant as well, to say, look, really informative. They're looking for slides and the recording, which is great. So that'll both of those will go out to anybody who signed up for this. But the question is, how do you know if your salary is below the market level? So I might put that question to you, Orna, if that's okay, just in terms of how you would know if you're being underpaid.
Yeah, and look, I suppose depending on what location you're in, like Barden in conjunction with CAI do have the annual salary survey that is very informative, and it gives very good information to hopefully get a good gauge of where you should hopefully be lying in the band for your level of role, the type of company, and it will give you a good idea of that. And I suppose that is obviously quite high level. We can't go into absolutely every single company in Ireland and every person, but it gives a very good gauge. And I suppose further to that, then what we suggest is you reach out to somebody, I suppose a specialist, let's say Karen and Dave in the institute, or another recruiter, or us here in Barden, and they can give more specific market information, you know, to help give you that informed decision and hopefully give you that bit more quantifiable data that you can put to an employer. So hopefully,
I think just to maybe to add on to that, Orna, is that, you know, like, it's very hard. You can't say I'm a financial controller, therefore my market rate is 85k plus add-ons, because the reality is it's about the size and scale of business. It's about how tight is the month-end close. It's about what size of team do you manage. So you know, to Orla's point of once you go past about 3 years PQE, got to be about the actual role that you're doing. So while, you know, some salary surveys, Grace says financial controller, anything from 60K to 100K, but you've got to find out a way to say, where on that band am I? And that comes down to specifics of the actual role you're doing, you know. So rather than there being this like perfect, here's exactly where I am, you know.
Exactly. And even things like, you know, industry sectors can have a bearing on that as well, because we know that different sectors, you know, would have different kind of pay scales, etc. So unfortunately, we're kind of coming to the end here. Time for one more question very quickly. And what I would say is, like, you know, if there are other questions afterwards, by all means, you can email careers@charteredaccountants.ie, and I can then share those questions with Elaine and Orna afterwards. But the last one, and we'll just take this very quickly, is, you know, and I might, Elaine, ask you about this one, which is about, you know, kind of, I suppose, the market for accountants moving home, and particularly, say, if you've been working somewhere like Cayman or, you know, Dubai, where, you know, you're used to
prepare yourself for the shock as well.
And that is it, because the member here is kind of saying, well, look, you know, you're used to a tax-free salary in those locations and the sunshine, and then you're coming and then you're coming home, and you might be getting, you know, slightly less in terms of, you know, the overall salary in the first instance, but also obviously you're taking the hit on tax. So any advice in that space? I know it's a very general and wide-ranging question, but just a couple of thoughts around it would be helpful.
Absolutely. And what we say to people is, you know, if you're looking for sunshine and low taxes, then Ireland isn't the place you should live. You know, that's the reality of it, unfortunately, you know. And, you know, that being said, right, you know, as much as I kind of jest there with that, is that, like, the market here is still very, like, it is still very strong. Our cost of living, while yes, it has increased hugely in the last, you know, kind of 12, 18, 24 months, your cup of coffee here is still going to cost you €4 instead of the equivalent of €6 or €7. So are you going to inevitably have to take some kind of a pay cut? Yes, you are, right? What we have seen actually is there have been a small percentage of people, maybe about 10% of people, that have relocated over the course of, say, the last couple of years because of COVID, who've actually managed to retain working their old role, but working it fully remotely, or working it with a monthly or a quarterly trip back to that original location. So, like, if that's something that is, like, it's something that's really, really worth strongly considering, right? That if an employer is going to allow you to do it, it can be brilliant. You can oftentimes keep your salary. The one thing I would say is the reality of, like, there's a thing called proximity bias, that if you are not directly located beside your boss and other people are, you are just less likely to be promoted. So you got to think about the medium to long-term career trajectory, if that's something. But look, is our cost of living quite obviously inflated? Is it still a little bit lower? Yes. Are there excellent opportunities out there for highly skilled accountants? Yes, absolutely. Do we see that reducing in 2024? To be honest, we don't, right? Do we think the wage inflation might slow a tiny little bit? Possibly, but that it might be a 3-4% increase rather than a 6 to 8% type of an increase. So the market is here. The market is still very, very buoyant, but unfortunately, there's nothing we can do about the weather.
Indeed, absolutely. Thanks for that, Elaine, and thanks so much as well, Orna. And really appreciate your insights. Just, there was one final question that I can kind of answer as we're closing out here, which was, like, when we're talking about salary, are we just talking about salary or including including package? But it's salary, typically base salary, that we've been speaking about here. Obviously, when you're negotiating for salary and the package, so you need to kind of keep that in mind. But I suppose when we're talking about salary trends, it tends to be generally the salary as opposed to the overall value of the package. But again, thank you so much, Elaine and Orna from Barden, and for partnering with us on the webinar today. And thank you so much for participating and the questions. It's great to see the interest in this topic, and thank you so much for your positive feedback. If you've any suggestions in terms of other topics that we can cover on our webinars going forward, by all means, just let me know. And thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Karen.
Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.